Hey family, it's your man Mark Black. I got a topic that I want to discuss today. I'm always about bringing us tools and resources that we can use to actually get free, for those of us who want to get free. And if you are concerned why I said it that way, just see my previous video on the whitest secret of black people, because it's a well-known fact that a lot of us don't want to be free. We want to actually get our turn at the trough, right? Sit at the table, so to speak. We don't want to change anything. We want to sit at the table. I'm not going to go back there. I said everything I had to say in that video. But before I get into the topic for today, I wanted to talk about an observation that I've seen and where I would like to kind of see things be, right? I've noticed that in our community, especially amongst the people that are visible, right, in the media, our media, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, there's different groups, each of which are focused on a particular area of our liberation struggle, right, of our path to freedom, so to speak, right? And I want to kind of lay those out and what I think about different things. The first group that I see a lot of, and again, I'm not going to denigrate any of these people. As I told you before, I'm not judging anyone here. We have one group that focuses primarily on spirituality and history, right? You can tell these people because a lot of them will be visibly different, right? They'll have maybe kente cloth on, or a thobe or a jalabia, right? They'll talk a lot about our relationship to our gods, the adoption of other religions and how that was forced on us. They talk a lot about history and our historical aspect as African people. And they'll put their focus there as the key, essentially, to unlock the door to freedom. If we get right with our gods and let go of the pale people's religions and understand our history, then we will have the spiritual force and the impetus to work toward our freedom. So there's that group. The second group, I like to say, focuses more on the psychosocial aspects of our liberation struggle, our fight for freedom, right? They will focus on a lot of lifestyle things, such as relationships between black men and women. They'll focus on, raising our children a certain way. They'll focus on, sexuality and things like that, right? Just topics in those veins. And those videos, you can usually tell those people because they're quite entertaining. And not to mention the fact that they get a lot of views, a lot of hits, a lot of comments, because when you're touching into psychosocial aspects, these are places where we express our individuality. So of course, one person's way is going to almost inherently conflict with another person's way. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of argumentation, not in a negative sense, just debate and discussion with these individuals. And they believe that focusing on the psychosocial aspects of what we're experiencing here in the hells of the West will allow us to gain our freedom. So there's that group. Then you have another group. I've noticed this group is slightly smaller, but no less vociferous than some of the other groups that focus on what they like to consider practicalities, right? About business building and development, about black economic empowerment and things like that, right? And you can tell these people because of their emphasis on doing something practical that you can measure, which I admire, right? You should be able to measure progress or measure movement one way or the other one. And of course, we know that money is one of those ways that you can measure movement one way or another, right? It's pretty common, right? Everywhere you go, people use money. I'm not going to denigrate money. Money has a purpose. It serves a purpose. So these individuals focus primarily on what you got, or if you ain't got nothing, how you gonna get it, or if you ain't got nothing, how come you don't got nothing, and if you ain't got nothing, why are you talking? You need to be going to getting something, right? So they're extremely practical, down to earth. They usually tend to show a lot of disdain for what they would call philosophy or spirituality, right? They don't really put a lot of stock into that. They're like, that's just pie in the sky crap that prevents us from actually doing something of substance, right? To get, show progress, to move forward on our path to freedom. So these three main groups I subscribe to and listen to and enjoy various individuals from all of these particular groups. The thing that I wanted to say briefly was that there's something that we kind of seem to forget when we espouse our particular group amongst these individuals, right? The lifestyle people judge the spiritual people because they say that the spiritual people are so high-minded and out of this world that nothing they offer is really practical, right? Which is actually an argument that they share with the, hardcore black empowerment, black economics people. The black economics people denigrate the lifestyle or psychosocial people and the spiritual people as just being talkers and not doers. You can't measure respect, you can't measure this, but you can measure wealth, you can measure money, you can measure these things, right? And so they give really short shrift to spirituality or worrying so much about lifestyle or psychosocial effects, only except where those psychosocial effects affect the bottom line. If pulling your pants up and speaking the King's English and stuff like that will increase the bottom line, then they're for it. Otherwise, they don't give a damn, right? Okay. And then the spiritual people will judge the lifestyle groups and the hardcore economic or, black economic empowerment groups because they say that doing all these things without an understanding of the philosophy behind which you're doing it or the spirit, if you will, in which you're doing it is useless. It makes you no better than the pale people. The pale people seem to act with no souls, with no spirit. And so having that aspect, that understanding of history and where we came from and a spiritual base gives meaning to the acquisitions or the good behaviors done by the people in the psychosocial group and the people that generate the resources in the black economic empowerment sort of hardcore economic group. So each of these three groups are at each other's necks, so to speak. They come at each other's necks a lot. As someone who watches media and observes videos and things like that from each of these individual groups, my personal philosophy, if you want to call it that, or practice or praxis, right, is that each of them are all right. We need all three things, right? We need an actual meaning or a purpose other than just to account or amass more dough, more land, more wealth. I mean, that makes us essentially no better than the pale people. If that's all we're about is just tabulating the numbers and making those zeros increase, okay, what's the point, right? Sure, white people exercise power in that fashion, right? They utilize these various systems, but economics is not the only way they dominate us. They dominate us in our spirituality or our religion. They dominate us in our entertainment and education. They use all the modes of people activity to get at us, right? To take everything that is us and make it theirs. So to say that spirituality somehow is deficient or not necessary for the growth of a people is a little bit disingenuous, because we're being attacked there too. So spirituality and understanding of history is definitely important. The psychosocial lifestyle piece is super important. There are certain behaviors that go to foster life for our people, and certain behaviors that bring us closer to destruction. We need to figure out for ourselves what those actions and ways of living, folkways, mores, lifestyles are, and adopt them as best we can while allowing some degree of tolerance for differences, because we're not going to all see these lifestyle things or psychosocial things the same. So that's important too. And I'm going out on a limb here with this one, but the Black economic empowerment advocates, the hardcore economic advocates, are also required. Yes, it is true, the pale people utilize the economic system to dominate over us on the daily. And without even a rudimentary understanding of how that occurs and how to combat it, right? In other words, tabulating those damned ones and zeros, right? And actually demonstrating here on the planet, in the real world, the effects of having a proper spiritual mindset, a proper psychosocial aspect to yourself, then yeah, they're absolutely right too. To focus solely on those things to the detriment of where we're going to get our damn daily bread, or how we're going to have places to live, or be able to acquire weaponry if need be to defend ourselves, and so on. They have a valid argument in that it is definitely necessary to empower ourselves financially. So I believe that all three groups, these predominant three groups, there are definitely others, right? But these three that I mentioned, they're all right. They are all right in their critiques of the other groups. The problem is that the emphasis is being placed on the individual groups, and we need a synthesis, a tie-in of all of these ideas under one umbrella. We need a purpose, right? We need that spiritual or historical, if you are not a spiritual person, we need that historical spiritual purpose to really give meaning to what it is that we're trying to do. We need a solid psychosocial aspect so that everybody's on code with what builds life as opposed to fostering destruction. And we need people who are willing to get their damned hands dirty in the dirt, the financial system, the economic systems, to be able to actually build and generate resources and a surplus of those resources so that we can use that for the growth of our people. They're all right, and I subscribe to them all. So there's my rant. I know that one probably, let's see here, I'm about 13 minutes in, so I know that one went over. But so the topic for today is a tool that we can use, because one of the things that I want to do is I don't want to go so far off into theory that I don't bring things back to earth, right? That's the lessons I take from the spiritual / historical people and the hardcore Black, economic empowerment people. And I don't use hardcore in a pejorative sense. I mean, they're vociferous. Damn it. Pardon me, people. There we go. Sorry about that. So I take that we have to have the purpose, but we need to bring the purpose down here to earth. So with that in mind, I wanted to discuss starting your own business today. Now, I'm going to keep this short and sweet, people. There's three basic types of business entities that are out there, right? Some work better than others for different things, but I'm going to mention all three because there's one that we primarily dominate in that doesn't quite offer as many benefits as others, okay? So the first business entity type is a sole proprietorship. A sole proprietorship is just you doing business under a different name. right? Mark Black doing business under Black Fist, right? Cool. A sole proprietorship is your business. You own it 100%, okay? But you and your business are not separate, right? You are doing business under a name, but it is you, which means that you still retain liability for anything that you do as a business. You have a store as a sole proprietorship. Someone comes in and slips and falls, well, guess what? They're going to sue. And who are they going to sue? They're not going to sue the name you're doing business under. They're going to sue you. And they have access to your resources, to your assets. So the lack of limited liability or protection against liability, in my opinion, makes sole proprietorship one of the weaker forms of doing business in this country. And it's also primarily why it's usually just small businesses that are sole proprietorships. It's just the easier thing to set up. There's no real requirement to file paperwork with the state or with the feds, right? All of your tax stuff adheres directly to you. So you just file, losses and wins on your personal income taxes and pay whatever personal income tax rate you fall under with that. It's fairly simple to set up, and that's usually why we do it, because it's just easier to do. The next business entity that I want to discuss is a corporation. That's one we're all familiar with. Corporations run this piece, okay? We all know it. Corporations own everybody, lock, stock, and barrel, pretty much, all right? Corporations are a business entity that is a separate business entity or a legal personage separate from its owners, right? The owners of the corporation are determined by who owns the shares of stock or who holds the shares of stock in the corporation. And the numbers of the shares of stock you own determines your level or your percentage of ownership in the corporation. Now, corporation has a lot of really cool benefits. One of the benefits of a corporation, and probably the preeminent one, is that as long as you maintain all of the legal requirements to keep it a separate entity from you, you enjoy protection against liability. Same scenario, you have a store and someone comes into your store and slips and falls. But now your store is not owned by you. It's owned by Black Fist Incorporated, right? When they sue, they're not going to sue you because you have no liability. They're going to sue Black Fist Incorporated. So even if they win their lawsuit and they strip Black Fist Incorporated of all its assets, you still get to keep your car. You still get to keep your house. You still get to keep your 401k and so on and so forth, okay? I'm not going to give tax advice and stuff like that in this video. That's way above my pay grade. Talk to brothers and sisters who are accountants and tax people. But there's some benefits to corporate taxation too as well. For example, corporations can write off losses, and corporate tax rates in every jurisdiction are lower for corporations than they are for persons, for actual people, right? The tax rates are lower. In some places, they're extremely low. So not only are you able to write off deductions and things like that as business expenses, thus reducing your total tax liability, right? But you also have ways and means of being able to make a living or create a living, if you will, utilizing corporate assets that reduce your level of ownership. And I'll go into that maybe in another video, because there's ways and means of using a corporate structure to provide your daily bread needs, etc., as an officer of a corporation without you having actual ownership over those things, right? So you can utilize a company car for transportation here and there. The company can buy you a place to live as an officer of the company. You can set up the corporate headquarters there and live there. It belongs to the company, but you utilize it. You retain control, but not ownership. And that's a big tool that the pale people use to be able to hide their own personal assets and things like that in a way that allows them to control a lot without having the liability of owning it. The last entity I want to talk about is the LLC. The LLC, or the limited liability company, is relatively new. It's primarily a state construct, meaning that the rules that govern LLCs are going to differ from state to state. Okay, I live in the state of Washington, and so the rules that govern the LLCs in the state of Washington are created by the Washington State Legislature and oversaw by the Secretary of State here in Washington State. The LLC is really cool because it provides, depending on the way you configure it from the moment you set it up, it provides the benefits of a pass-through entity like a partnership or a sole proprietorship. In other words, income that comes into the business passes through to the people that the members, the owners of the LLC, but with the liability protection of a corporation, meaning that doing business as the LLC acts as a shield against liability for your own personal assets. Another benefit with an LLC is that the requirements to maintain an LLC are much lower than the requirements to maintain a corporation legally. In Washington State, all you have to do is file an annual report with the Secretary of State, just detailing where the place of business is, who's the registered agent, meaning the person that communicates with the Secretary of State and the Secretary of State can communicate with, and so on and so forth. Very low paperwork requirements, comparatively speaking, to a company, to a corporation. Okay, so these are the three entities. I recommend strongly that you set up at least an LLC, right? Even as an employee, right? Even though you have a job, you should set up an LLC. And why should you set up an LLC? Because the fact is that once you have your own company, your own business, there's a whole range of benefits that open up to you that you don't have as just a regular person. Remember, companies are now considered people. So companies have freedom of speech, they can make political contributions and all this and that. Companies have a level of influence in our society that individual people do not. Companies can make investments and purchase and do different things in ways that people cannot. Actual real life flesh and blood people. Not to mention the fact that they've almost made it to where as an employee you can never really get ahead. You can never really get anywhere, right? You can make a pretty high income, but that income is going to be dependent upon a company of some sort. And when that company folds or dries up or leaves for parts unknown, there goes your income. Whereas if you have your own business, especially with your own protective business entity in place, that business entity acts as your public face. And it allows you to use and do different things that you couldn't do otherwise solo. Right? You can get credit in the name of your company. You can acquire resources in the name of your company. Matter of fact, using an LLC, you can actually issue out percentages of ownership, of membership in the LLC, and you can sell those to raise capital to do some of the things that you want to do. And it works just as good for a small business. If you have a landscaping company, if you do hair, get you a LLC. Get it today. Now, before I finish this up, I've told you guys before, I'm not one to just talk about things. I'm one to do them. This is the article, actually the certificate of formation for my LLC here in the state of Washington, Garvestern Ventures LLC. That's my company. I own that. I'm 100% sole member and sole owner of Garvestern Ventures LLC here in the state of Washington. I have an employee identification number from the feds. I have a UBI, or a Uniform Business Identifier, from the state of Washington. What else? With an LLC, you can actually open up a bank account in the name of your company. This is my corporate card. This is my corporate bank account. Okay, I make purchases for my company, right? Keeping things separate for my company and myself to maintain that liability protection, my company has its own bank account. So now when I do business, people don't write checks to Mark Black, right? They write checks to Garvester. And that money can pass through to me. Any losses can pass through to me. So that at the end of the year, when I have to file my taxes, I can count the losses. Even if I take L's, right? Using Garvester, I can count those losses as deductions on my personal taxes. Meaning that I will get back a refund for the taxes I paid as an employee. Do it. Set up an LLC today. This cost me $200. $200 is you and the family messing off at the movies 4 times in a month. $200 is, I haven't never bought a pair, but I'm assuming is around the cost of a pair of J's, right? We mess off $200 like it's nothing. But $200 could start to build a foundation for you and your family's future, for a legacy. Make it happen, family. Set up an LLC today. Paperwork requirements aren't that hard. Keeping track of expenses using your corporate accounts, not that hard. And you set a foundation and a level of pride for you and your family. Even if you haven't made a penny yet, you've made a step. One of the things that I get frustrated about with the hardcore, right, I'm gonna stop using that term, with the Black economic empowerment people, is they say that people who do not do what they do aren't actually building anything. And I do get the argument. I do understand the argument. And there is a truth to it, right? You can have your head so damn far up in the clouds that you actually accomplish nothing here. And so that critique is true in a lot of ways. However, a lot of them will come off as if you don't have money flowing in like 40 going north, right, and 0 stacked to the ceiling, that you don't have a voice, that you don't have shit to say. If you are not super successful right now at this point, no one should listen to you. And that's not true. Timbuktu was not built in a day. Doing something like this is a foundation, a place to build from. And yes, it is an accomplishment. It is something to be proud about. It does give you the ability to speak on this topic. I don't make a lot of money yet as Garvester, and I'm not going to sit here and lie to you about it. I do have irons in the fire. I got things that I'm working on, right? And as those things progress, I'll share them with you. But to sit here and pretend I haven't actually done something toward my own empowerment and the empowerment of my people would be disingenuous, right? Every step taken in that direction should be acknowledged, especially with the people that, since the days of Black Wall Street and so on and so forth, really haven't done a lot at all as far as economic empowerment. So every step in that direction needs to be recognized. I'm not saying everybody should get public cookies, every time they start a new LLC or whatever, but economic empowerment builds from a foundational base like every other structure. And to act like you only have some degree of power once you reach the pinnacle is just disingenuous. So just a lightweight critique for that. At any rate, I'm going to finish this one up. It's your man Mark Black. More videos is coming. As a matter of fact, I promised a video discussing food and health amongst the Black community. I've got some real cool stuff to bring to you people, because like I said, I don't talk about it. I'm just gonna be about it. So I got some cool stuff that I'm gonna bring to you on the topic of food and health amongst our people. Until the next time, love, peace, prosperity, and power to my people.